Hello. Have you ever gotten into your car or maybe kicked your dirt bike or hopped on the lawnmower, turned the key and wondered what the heck is going on with this thing? How is this thing running and getting me from point A to point B? What's making this thing move? My name is Kyle Campbell, and today I'm going to explain to you the four-stroke engine process or the four-stroke engine cycle, and explain and hopefully help you understand what's going on in that machine to help you understand it. Um, you know, I think this is really important, not only for troubleshooting problems you may have with a certain vehicle, but also just for an appreciation of the engineering that goes into these machines to make them do what they do. There's a few components I'd like to go over with you to kind of explain, help you understand better this process. There's a few components we really need to understand kind of what their function is within our engine. The first one is we have to have a cylinder, and you can see that our cylinder is just a cylinder-shaped piece of aluminum or steel, doesn't really matter. But this is just a cylinder that our piston can move up and down inside of on our engine, okay? And on our piston, we have what's called a connecting rod, and this rod attaches to a crankshaft. Okay, and a crankshaft is very important. Crankshaft takes up and down or linear movement of our piston and turns it into rotational energy that we can use we can drive a sprocket, to drive a dirt bike, or we could turn a drive shaft in our car, something that takes that rotating motion to spin our rear wheels and drive our machine down the road. So these are some very important components. Also in a four-stroke engine, we have what's called a cylinder head. And you don't need to remember that, but what you do need to remember is that our cylinder head houses a couple of valves. One-way valves to allow air and fuel into our engine and to allow exhaust gases out of our engine. Okay, so these are some very important components. Our cylinder head sits above our cylinder and has access to the outside of our engine. Okay, so we're gonna get into the four-stroke engine cycle here. Very first thing that happens is our piston starts all the way up inside of our cylinder. It sits all the way up at the top. And what happens is our intake valve opens, okay? So our intake valve opens and our piston moves down inside the cylinder. We call this the intake stroke. We are actually causing a vacuum above the piston as it's moving down or falling inside of the cylinder. And this vacuum draws in air and fuel from outside of our engine, okay? We have to have an air and a fuel mixture that's very combustible and it burns easily and can provide some power for our engine. So the intake stroke, piston starts at the top, moves straight down in the cylinder with the intake valve open. Now the second stroke in our four-stroke engine cycle is after the intake stroke has been completed, the piston moved towards the bottom. The piston's now going to move back towards the top, but during this compression stroke, both of our valves remain in the closed position. So now that we've drawn in that air-fuel mixture, we are now going to compress that air-fuel mixture inside of our cylinder. Now, typical engines usually compress this air-fuel mixture about 8.5 to 10 times its original size. This gives us a very explosive mixture inside of our engine. Okay, so this is really important. Compression is very important in our engine. Now, the piston is all the way at the top of its stroke in the cylinder. Both valves are closed. And at this point in time, we have a spark plug in our engine that's going to cause a small spark at the tip of it. And that's going to ignite that air-fuel mixture inside of our engine. And what this is going to do is it's going to force that piston down with an explosion inside of it. Right above our piston, it's going to force that piston down on what we call the power stroke. Okay, and this is really important because this is when we're actually forcing this crankshaft to spin in our engine and creating the power needed to drive our machine. So we call this the power stroke. After the power stroke has been completed, we've gotten the rotation from our crankshaft that we need to drive our machine. We are now going to go into our exhaust stroke. In the exhaust stroke, again, we're going to open another valve, a different valve this time, our exhaust valve. Exhaust valve is going to open up, the piston is going to move towards the top of the cylinder, and it's going to force the exhaust gases out of our exhaust system or our muffler on our car or our dirt bike, whatever that machine is. This is really important because the gases that are left over after this explosion happens cannot support another explosion until we get rid of them. So exhaust is very important. We got to get rid of that leftover gas that's inside of our engine. So now the exhaust stroke has been completed. That is our fourth and final stroke. The next stroke that occurs is going to be our intake stroke again. So we're going to go down on the intake stroke. Piston falls inside of the cylinder, causing that vacuum. We have intake. Piston moves back towards the top with both valves closed. We have compression. That spark plug fires. Piston gets forced down on our power stroke, rotating our crankshaft. And now we're going to come back up on our exhaust stroke with that exhaust valve open to complete our 4-stroke engine cycle. Again, I think this is a really important thing just to kind of understand. When you turn that key in your car, you're like, oh man, I kind of, a little bit, understand how this thing is driving down the road. Now, there are some other complicated systems that get involved in this, but the 4-stroke engine theory of operation is really quite simple, and I hope you learned something today. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Kyle Campbell, and I hope you enjoyed this.